As you know, the proceeds from tonight's events will be directed to cystic fibrosis research. At this point, we thought you might enjoy learning a little bit more about how the funds are utilized specifically. Please welcome the co-director of the Snyder Institute of Infection, Immunity, and Inflammation from the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Calgary, the fabulous Dr. Chip Doig.
Now, I'd like to give you a little bit of a taste of the research that's done in III, and I'm going to make this very specific to cystic fibrosis. So, when I was training as a medical student, and what I had on one of my slides is a quote from a textbook at the time, which described what occurs in cystic fibrosis. So I can't give you the exact quote, but if you'll permit me, I'll paraphrase it slightly. That cystic fibrosis, results in patients who have very viscid or thick secretions in their lung. These patients develop chronic inflammation, and they often develop chronic infection with an organism called Pseudomonas, which causes rapid lung deterioration and ultimately their death. Now, when I first came to Calgary, I met a physician that I don't mind drawing your attention to since he's in the audience. He's an exemplar physician because he is caring, he is smart, he is kind, he is interested in trainees, but most importantly, what I learned from him as a trainee is how well he cares for patients. And that's Dr. Harvey Rabin. Now, I also first met Dr. Rabin on service on one of the teams when he admitted a patient who had cystic fibrosis. And I was sort of thinking to myself, geez, this is unusual. He has his own private patients that are cystic fibrosis patients. And that was one of the first times I got to meet Dr. Rabin and talk to him, know his background as an infectious disease doctor. And he was talking to me about Pseudomonas, and I went, I read about that, I understand that. Now I'm going to move you fast forwards to work that's been done over the last decade in the III Institute, partly sponsored by the fundraising that you've done. So Dr. Mike Strate, and I'd just like to tell Tyler in the back, I believe you're from Dr. Strate's lab. I sent him a text message that you had won all the wine. He wants half of it. But Dr. Mike Strate's lab, Mike Strate is a microbiologist who was recruited or attracted here from Princeton University, and I think you all know the caliber of institution Princeton is. So this is what III does. III brings a microbiologist like Dr. Strate and all of his team that works together with an individual, a clinician like Dr. Rabin, and there are clinicians at Dr. Rabin's table that work with him, and they discover new evidence. So I had on one of my slides just 3 publications that were generated by this collaboration, and those 3 publications talked about this organism called Streptococcus milleri. And Strep milleri for a doc is one of the strep viridans group. It doesn't really mean that much. It's often a colonizer or a contaminant. Kind of don't worry about it as often, 20 years ago what we were taught about this organism. But what Dr. Rabin and Dr. Strate and the team that they work together have found is that you can identify this, what was once thought seemingly as innocuous organism in patients who have cystic fibrosis. And those colony counts of these bacteria start to go up prior to them developing the Pseudomonas infection. And if you treat that Streptococcus milleri, you can preserve their lung function and prevent these serious infections and the rapid deterioration in their lung function. And when I first read their paper, much like my wife said, "What's this III, huh?" I went, "Huh?" And I had to lift my jaw off the ground, because this is the type of groundbreaking, oh my gosh type of research that you are helping to support, that will make a huge difference in the lives of patients, including this young man that you saw in the video. So my final slide was going to be a picture which I stole from Paul's slide deck, which is a picture of Nikki as a young girl and as a baby, which said that, research gave me a future, and to say thank you. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Doig, for sharing your knowledge and your passion for Saskatchewan women. In fact, Joe, if you wouldn't mind, Erin signed that program for Dr. Doig. There you go. Enjoy that. Your wife will appreciate how priceless that will be. Yeah. We should have auctioned it. We can't thank you enough for the knowledge that we've gained already, and it's about time that we introduce you to our keynote speaker. Before I do that, you've met Rosa back over here. Rosa, where are you? Hi. We've got somebody up here you might know. But I want to introduce you to Dominic Mandato. Dominic, a big fan of Nikki and, of course, of all the people here with the CF lung function. We can't say enough about Dominic, but he also has a very special guest who we've had the pleasure of meeting tonight. Dominic, if you wouldn't mind introducing our keynote speaker.
Thank you very much, Beesley. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. I'm one of the directors of on the board for the Summit Foundation, and I joined this group about 3 or 4 years ago. And for those of you who don't know Nikki, make the effort and introduce yourself to her, and you'll see why some of us spend some of our volunteer hours to making sure that an event like this is successful, and it truly is tonight. So thank you very much. Thank you for coming out tonight. And so as part of making this night a success, I approached Nikki a couple of weeks ago, or more like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we talked about what should we do in terms of, an entertainment factor or something a little bit that will take people not necessarily off the mindset of CF, but also drive home the real reason of why we're all here. And I was talking to them about Phillip McKernan. Now, I met Phillip about 3 or 4 years ago, and I said, you've got to see this guy in action. He will captivate you. He will give you a different perspective on life. And speaking of perspective, that's his talk tonight. A dyslexic boy from a small village in Ireland, Phillip is now a successful entrepreneur, international real estate investor, and best-selling author. Phillip speaks around the world about the importance of overcoming obstacles, gaining clarity, living your passion, and cultivating the necessary confidence to believe you can do it. And so, with further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Phillip McKernan, all the way from Vancouver, and originally from Ireland. So he speaks a little funny. Please welcome Phillip McKernan.
I remember doing some research on the whole concept of happiness about 3 years ago, because I was speaking across Canada to about 4,000 to 5,000 people in different cities. And I remember just creating a very simple, very basic exercise called Your 5 Happiest Days. And I remember asking my wife, what's your 5 happiest days? She said, well, I don't know, I haven't really thought about it. I said, well, think about it. Maybe you might just want to think about this right now. What's the happiest day of your life? Not that you were euphoric from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. But that might have been just something simple. It was a laugh. It was a dinner. It was a conversation. So I said, let's do this exercise. So she writes down her 5 happiest days, and she's in the corner giggling away. I'm in the corner giggling away. And then we come together, and I go, well, what were they? And I won't give you all of them, but her top one was her wedding. She goes, my wedding was my number one. She says, what was yours? And I said, well, it was my stag party. True story. And she goes, okay. And she was trying to put on this brave face as if I support that. That's okay. I get it. She hated my guts that moment in time. I said, what was your second? She says, it was a day we spent in an orphanage in Sri Lanka. And I said, wow, so was mine. said, I didn't know it impacted you that much. She goes, yeah. She says, I didn't know it impacted you that much. It is a stunning exercise to bring home. Might sound so ridiculously simple. If you want to get to know your partner, you want to understand their values and what makes them tick, what turns them on. You want to do this with your kids, because one kid will have one set of values, what they think is happy for them, and the other will have something different. And then the obvious next question was, what the hell are we going to do about this? What are we actually going to do about this? By identifying that experience, what we ended up doing, I wrote a book a number of years later, and I contributed all the royalties to the charity because we now identified what it was. But what it really brought up for us was the importance and the depth that contribution can bring to the table in anybody's life. And we've seen some of those people here tonight, and every one of you are contributing in your own way. And I, in my own way, I was quite confident coming here today until Ryan's mum got up and took the stage. And actually, after that, I was thinking, where am I going to go? But in my own way, I know you've paid for tickets today. I know you've dig deep, and you're here and you're giving your time. But maybe there's something else. Maybe there's something else you can do. Because by God, if you don't have contribution in your life, you are lacking meaning. And I often hear, well, you know, Phillip, no, I'm going to come back. I'm going to save Africa. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my millions first, and then I'm going to go and save the world. There's a lot of people talking about saving the world, but there's very few people doing something about it. What are you doing now? What are you doing today? Don't wait for the future to contribute to society, because the rewards you get are tenfold, minimum. I also speak a lot in schools as part of my contribution. It's not my business, but I love speaking in schools. They're the toughest audience in the world. The toughest audience. I speak to 16 to 17-year-olds, 16, 17, 18-year-olds, and they are tough, tough, tough. And I was in Ireland recently, and I went to a school, and it was 130 girls, and we basically went in, and I basically had about an hour with them. And there were some really fascinating things, which I don't really have time to tell you tonight. Nikki's only given me 2 hours tonight on stage. I didn't get any rules, so that's kind of cool. I can do whatever I want up here. But there's about 130 girls, and they were fantastic. They were beautiful. They were young adults, as I call them. And at one point I said to them, what's the greatest challenge you feel that you're facing today? What is the greatest challenge? And I was expecting things like the economy, and because the economy in Ireland is ugly. I mean, it is horrendous and getting worse. And they all said lots of things, but they focused on points. In other words, the number of points they've got to get in order to get into a particular college or whatever it was. I know what you call them over here. I assume it's the same similar thing. So I let them go, and then I said, you know what? Guys, I actually believe that your greatest challenge today is entitlement. I said, you know what that is? They said, no. I said, let me give you my perspective on this, and then in a moment or two you can argue with me or tell me I'm full of crap or whatever. I said, entitlement is basically where you take a calf elephant out of a jungle, you put them in a luxury zoo with a leather couch, with a PlayStation, with an iPhone, with a big plasma screen, and you hand feed them every day of your life. And then you take that elephant out of the zoo and put them back in the jungle 20 years from now and go, Bob, Jenny, go. Gonna be cool, isn't it? Good luck. And I said, you guys, and I pointed at every one of the girls, and I said, you guys are milking the system. There's not one of you in this room going, Dad, I don't want the PlayStation. You've given me enough. I want love. I want hugs. I want meaning. I want to go to the zoo and look at the little teddy bears and hug you. You're milking it. Every one of you. And you know your parents are so caught up in keeping up with the Joneses. You know your parents are riddled with such guilt because they're buried in their iPhones and they're not spending time with you. Then you take advantage of every aspect of that. I said, now bring it on. Expecting to be bombarded, booed, thrown out, or kicked. And every one of them. It's true. I don't know how entitled Ryan feels in his life. Probably not.